Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Jody Lynn and I are joined by Joy the cat, who may or may not be joining us on camera. He's kind of deciding whether he's camera shy today, so we'll talk about that. But Jody Lynn, we were comparing temperatures. I'm actually almost as cold as you guys are. I mean, that's Canadian level temperatures going on there, and we're almost there. Like, wow.
Yeah, I don't know. You wanted to join Canada, or maybe Canada wanted to become the 51st state.
Hey, you never know. It could be either way. But it's not just us. Our guest is from Georgia, and they got cold temperatures too. Well,
yeah,
it was winter or something. I don't know. It's weird.
You'd think it was winter.
Yeah, I don't know.
January can be misleading.
So we're joined today by Roni Robbins, who is the author of a novel called Hands of Gold. That when did that book come out?
2022.
2022. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a novelist, which I really appreciate. I don't get to interview a lot of novelists. I've interviewed like maybe 2 over the last 12 years. But it's fun because novel writing is different from writing a nonfiction book. I mean, they're both writing. There's a lot of work that goes into a lot of editing and so forth. But I don't know. Maybe you have a different take on it, Roni. I just think novels are cooler because there's so much more creativity involved in them. And I love creativity.
There's creativity involved, yes, and a lot. It's freeing for somebody who's used to writing for newspapers and magazines and publications that have to be very factual. So I got to experiment, and I found it very challenging to actually make up dialogue and make up. I changed the names of all the players too, but the dialogue was hard, just how people interact with each other, what they might have said to each other. I found that the hardest part. I had an interview. My grandfather left cassette tapes of his life and his adventures and his near-death experiences, but I filled in the blanks and changed, like I said. So there is some freedom for me to be more creative than I can be in a straight news story. I try to be as creative as I can with everything that I write, and I think that all writers have to use creativity, and nobody wants to hear something dry, so you got to liven it up regardless. So
yeah, well, I mean, on kind of the negative side too, that's where a lot of what they call fake news comes from. That's totally creative. I mean, just make it up out of thin air. So. Yeah. But when you're writing a novel, well, first of all, it sounds like from what you're describing, a lot of this is drawn from reality-based. So this is based on actual events, but you've changed it so that you've turned it into a fictional recount instead.
Right.
I guess that probably creates extra challenges. I mean, you mentioned the difficulty involved in writing dialogue, and that is a skill. It takes some time to learn how to do that. Yeah, it takes practice to do it. It's going to be especially harder, though, I would think. I've never done that. I've never written dialogue about characters that were based on real people. I would think that's harder because now you can't just invent another character's mindset. You have to kind of know that person's mindset in order to make the character true to them. That's challenging.
I did the best I could, but my main character is a male, so young male to begin with, an older male to begin with, to end with. Actually, at the beginning and the end, he's an older man. So I'm channeling males as a female is the challenge. You know, the story is based on true life, and I knew the main characters, but how could I possibly know what's going on in their minds? So I had to know. So I had to try to put myself in that time period and in that situation, and then I got into the brain of the people, you know, mostly the main character.
Was your main character still around, or he's gone?
No, he left cassette tapes of his life, and my mom gave them to me. And yeah, and I should mention that they this was after he passed away that I got the tapes, and I transcribed the tapes. And researched and filled in the blanks. He was told he was terminal at 26 and lived till 86.
Wow.
He had tuberculosis, which was a death sentence back then. But he was a clinical trial patient for streptomycin, which is still used today, and paved the way for medicines that used to treat tuberculosis, which is the largest infectious disease killer in the world.
Right.
So there was that. So some based on history, research, and they lost most of their family in the Holocaust. So what was that like? That guilt, and I just drew on whatever I could. So the question is, did I capture the characters properly? And those that knew the characters say I did. So I don't know how that miraculously happened, except that I did know them too. But they don't know what the characters were thinking any better than I did, basically. So
that's where your cover is as a writer, because everybody else is imagining just like you are.
Yeah. So
that's difficult.
All of it is difficult to keep writing for that length of time. It's 80,000 words or so. I'm used to writing something that's maybe at the most 3,000, but typically 1,500, 1,200, shorter than that. So, that's the challenge, is to keep the storyline going. There was romance. I talked about some of the tragedy. They were married for 65 years. They died on the date of each other, January 31st, which is actually coming up, a year apart. So then they were actually the same age at death, because my grandmother was a year older and she went first. So he was making these cassette tapes while she was in her last stages, to try to just not be so depressed about her, her surgery, her final experience, health challenges, and what that might mean for their future, or they weren't going to have much of it. So he taped his life story. So yeah, all challenging as a journalist to make things fiction.
Yeah. Well, I think there's probably pluses and minuses when you're drawing from somebody real. I've been sitting here thinking about that as I asked you that question. The pluses that you know something about them, the minuses that you know something about them. It's the same thing either way.
Exactly.
So you're setting yourself up for failure and success at the same time. And I appreciate what you have to say about writing a primarily male character as a female writer. I've experienced the same thing writing female characters as a male writer. And it is an interesting challenge. I mean, my characters have all been pure fiction, just made up out of thin air. So I could be a little bit more free, and I could, if I was off a little bit, who would know? Because they aren't real people.
You made them up.
What's that, Jody Lynn?
You made them up. So
I made them up. That's right.
Yeah.
And well, I don't know what you think, Roni, but when I was writing my characters up, I did what a lot of authors do. I outlined all my characters very carefully in high detail, so that as I'm writing about, incorporating dialogue around them or whatever, I'm looking at what I wrote about them, so I know, okay, this is who they are. They did this. They have that background. They have that interest. They have these tendencies and so forth. And so that gives me, it's like a cheat sheet to work off of when you're working off an outline like that. So that kind of gives you a little bit of, I don't know, a feeling of stability as you're creating these characters, as you're trying to put some dialogue into their mouths. But
I didn't use an outline, so I have to tell you. No,
Wow.
I did not use an outline. I just wrote and rewrote and reworked and moved things around constantly for a long time. So I took a long time with this story, with the book. I started in 2000. I was doing this while my children were little. And I was freelancing for some pretty big publications at the time too. So I was doing three things at once. I was trying to be a good mom and stay home and be the educator, the main educator, and expose them to books and culture and the outdoors and, healthy lifestyle. But I also was freelancing, trying to keep my hand in journalism. I didn't think I could do it all as a journalist and be a mom because the hours were so unpredictable. A story breaks, you have to go cover it.
Right.
So I decided to stay home, but I also knew that I wanted to write this book. So I was doing all three things. So it took me a long time. I was some of the publications that picked up my stories at that time, Forbes, Huffington Post. I was a correspondent an Atlanta correspondent for the New York Daily News. And WebMD at that, all through this freelance period, and all while also writing a book and raising my young children.
Wow.
So it took me an awful long time. I was very patient, and I knew that I wanted to get a professional publisher. So I was in it for the long haul. I don't know if I had some health restrictions or scares, I guess, or felt like I was too old, I might have self-published, but I didn't. I wanted to hold out for the professional. So it took a lot of years of waiting too. It took me a while to write the book. And then I won my first award in 2009, but you see, the book came out in 2022. So it took me a long time. During that time, I was perfecting it so that I would win 5 more awards once it came out. So it all worked out for a reason. An interesting story is that irony of it all, how life works out. I was correspondent for the New York Daily News. My grandfather was written up in the New York Daily News. He was involved in a workplace shooting when he was in rehabilitation for tuberculosis. There was it was a factory, or they made clothing. So he was the supervisor. They made clothing or fixed clothing. And he was a supervisor, and a gunman came in, and he talked to the gunman there was 200 people there, and he talked to the gunman. Now that's what happened in the real story. In my book, he takes it further and actually stops the shooting from happening. But one person died. So that's all in the novel. There was an accidental killing in the novel. So there's a lot of twists and turns in addition to family experiences, and just the life of a person, the life of a man, and how impactful we all can be in our lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
Great message too. I like that one. And you were picked up by Amsterdam publishers. There's always a great publisher story involved. Tell us what the story is and how you hooked up with them.
Well, I'll have to tell you that I think 2 years. So in 2020, around 2020, probably before the pandemic, I got a publisher. Actually, I think it was 2018. I got a publisher, and I worked with her for 2 years, and I lost the publisher. I wanted an LLC to protect myself from anyone suing me, and she got cold feet, the publisher. So 6 months later, I found Amsterdam Publishers. They are the largest European publisher of Holocaust memoirs. Now, my book is not a memoir, it's fiction. So it's a new area for them. That the Amsterdam Publishers has some bestsellers. And I've been on the bestseller list for Amazon for in different categories in the top 20, I guess. As I've found it, as I keep track of it, but for different categories, for Holocaust biography and biographical literary fiction, for Kindle and paperback. So, but there are some bestsellers, like major bestsellers, on the list of say 100 authors among Amsterdam publishers. So we are a big community, a very supportive community. I try to be active on our Facebook group that tries to help each other, give each other tips for how to be successful in marketing. So we are a big author community, just as ourselves.
That's terrific. Yeah. When you have that level of support from your fellow authors, I mean, you've all been down the road.
Yes.
You've all got the scars. You've got the battle scars. You've got the battle cries. You got all of it going at the same time. You know all of it.
Yes.
So there's a lot of sharing you can do, which is great. That
Yeah.
kind of support is
Yeah,
always
we
good.
all are very supportive and repost what, and like online.
Yeah, it's like having
Social media.
your own marketing team all in one place. It's great. I love it. So give us like a quick tour of the novel. I mean, we don't want to spoil it for people who want to read the novel, but give us a quick tour of it.
So I thought I did all the way along, but okay, we'll do it
Well,
again.
just,
Okay, so my grandfather left cassette tapes. He was told he was terminal with TB. He was a clinical trial patient for streptomycin. They were married for 65 years. Sorry, 65 years, and they went through a lot together. His health being a major issue that they had to deal with. And losing most of their family in the Holocaust. It's all in the novel. Workplace shooting spree, an accidental killing, and loss of a child, the loss of a grown son to leukemia. So my grandfather was in and out of rehabilitation and hospitals. They had 5 children. So again, they lost one, but my grandfather came to America by walking across countries and jumping ship into America, through Canada, through Boston. And the first time he ventured out, he got as far as Prague, and he was from Hungary, Czechoslovakia, which was changing borders at that time. I say in the beginning of the book, Russia seems to like to fight. Well, we're back with Russia seeming to like to fight, or at least fighting. So some of the themes, it's fighting again, so Ukraine and Russia, that whole area was changing hands very frequently. So you got Czechoslovakia, Hungary. My grandmother was from Romania. Much of that is Ukraine today. So I talk about that and the political changes that were going on at the time. And the Holocaust also is a big issue in the book, and anti-Semitism. So that first time that my grandfather ventured out, he wanted to come to America. It was known as the golden land, the golden opportunities, right? The golden paradise. So you see gold in the headline, in the title.
Oh, that's okay.
No, but it's one of them.
It's one of them. Oh, okay. It's one of those. All right.
It's a little tricky. Hey, with fiction, you're allowed to have secrets. So there's lots of secrets being exposed. And one of those I try to keep is the hands of gold. It's not exactly what the picture shows on the cover. It's although the picture shows hardworking hands, and my grandfather was a farmer and also a tailor and a he did cobblesmith. No, it's called cobbler. He did a lot with his hands. But he was just an interesting character who had to go through a lot. They did lose their whole, most of their family in the Holocaust. What's that like, to deal with that kind of a guilt, to deal with the guilt of accidentally killing somebody, to wish that you could do more and be limited by your health. My grandmother had to be the breadwinner at a time when women were not breadwinners to take care of the family. They had to be on welfare a little bit, government assistance. Nobody wants to be on government assistance, but she was managing to take care of her family, and all they wanted was to come to America for the freedoms that they might enjoy here, to make a little money, to provide a nice life for their family, to not have to deal with anti-Semitism that existed in Europe. And so in that way, the small pleasures of being able to practice their Judaism, and there's a lot of culture, ethnic culture weaved through the book, and also Yiddish, which was the native language that they might have used, that they did use at the time. Of course, when they came to America, they were trying to get to assimilate in the grand melting pot and lose some of that. They didn't want it. They hid it a little bit that they were Jewish. They didn't want, they wanted the children to use English. So all of that is in the book. At the beginning of end of life, contemplating, the end, all of that, and that mindset, what my grandfather was thinking at the time. We do get into my grandmother's history a little bit also, as it weaves into his life. She was a singer in the Yiddish theater. So she was a performer. She dressed real nice. She made her own clothes. This was like flapper time.
1920.
Yeah. So, but it talks about the golden age of radio and television, and union striking. There's a lot. I mean, this book is taking you through from the early 1900s to 1990s, early 1990s. So I have to have pop culture throughout to give you a sense of what was going on at the time. The Great Depression is in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyone who lived during that era lived through a lot. I mean, we're going through a lot right now because of what's going on technologically. But anyone, the generation you're describing is my parents' to grandparents' era. And
right.
Anybody who lived in that era, they lived a life. I mean, there was a lot that happened. I don't care where you were in the world. I don't care what your life was. There was a lot that was going on.
Yes. Wars. And yet we deal with a lot too. We've survived COVID. We had COVID, and there are wars raging in the world. For us, what's going on in Israel feels very close to home. Being Jewish, and that anti-Semitism that is throughout the country with college campuses, and there's different sides. I think as a Jewish author, there's been backlash against those who write about Jewish subjects. Censorship. There's a lot of people who feel one way or another, and so they might lash out at somebody who talks about these kind of issues. There's two sides of the story, and if you're not on the side that they agree with, you're gonna get attacked. Through tech, through social media or such. So other authors have had to deal with that, and my publisher. So the anti-Semitism exists, and is maybe it's been bubbling under the surface the whole time, but the war in Israel definitely brought out a lot of it.
Well, fear tends to bring out all kinds of prejudices, and certainly anti-Semitism is an excellent example of that. And anytime that fear amplifies, it's going to increase the experiences. And certainly there's been plenty of amplification of fear over the last few years, and it'll probably continue for quite some time. One thing that we like to talk about a lot, though, is how during the greatest amount of contrast and tragedy compared to joy and all that kind of stuff that goes on, that's where the greatest learning also takes place. So, I mean, different people, like you pointed out, have different perspectives on it. My perspective is I look around at the world, and with all the troubles that's going on, I say to myself, my God, there's a lot of growth going on right now. A lot of personal growth, human growth, a lot of painful growth, a ton of painful growth, but I just keep seeing growth. And I don't know if that matches at all with what your experience is, but I just wanted to share that. What's your take on that?
So growth, it depends on if you're talking about my own personal growth or like what my grandfather learned at that time.
Yes.
Okay. Which one? Okay. All right. So grandfather. So he held on to the simple joys of being able to be healthy, which I think many of us take for granted until we have some health challenges. Certainly COVID brought that around for many of us. I mean, this tuberculosis is an upper respiratory illness similar to COVID or RSV, the flu, pneumonia. So it's, people think that tuberculosis went away, and it didn't. Maybe it was in the background when COVID and these other newer illnesses, I don't know if they're newer, but emerged and became, headlines, and people experienced them. So you don't hear about it as much in the United States, maybe in developing countries. But like I said, tuberculosis is still the largest infectious disease killer in the world. So to have to go through that and to still be able to be in America and practice your religion freely, seemingly freely I more free than he would have been if he stayed in Europe. And certainly there, but for the grace of God go I, he would have died in the Holocaust like the rest of his family. Of course, he lived with the guilt of not doing more, or, not understanding. I mean, most people don't understand why. So how he found the simple joys of living a life and practicing religion and having family gatherings, and being able to study and read and culture. He valued all of that, and that's expressed in the novel too. In terms of, I think also that when we go through something in life, say it's the wars. I mean, he experienced World War I too. He left between the wars, but he understood a little bit about World War I also. So he was trying to escape from being conscripted into the Czechoslovakian army. So he did understand what was going on at the time, and that he was involved in war, that his country was involved in war. So he really was trying to get away too from that, more so than anything else, and for that better life that he thought was in America. His siblings had come here, so he knew from them, or he believed from them that he was going to find streets paved with gold, but they weren't exactly what he
Not
thought.
quite, no.
No, they were quite dirty when he came to New York. So he didn't really get that. So they weren't exactly paved with gold, but as he expected. So I don't know. He was naive about that. They really were paved with gold, like the Wizard of Oz or something. So
the Yellow Brick Road.
Yeah. So but he appreciated life. Now, as far as, and I think they both appreciated life, both my grandparents, and he taught that value. And he also understood things happen, and you just got to, move ahead, go with the flow, get past one challenge and hope that there isn't another. I think that's pretty much our lives is, what's the next exciting thing you have to look forward to versus dwelling on these things that happen, because things happen. So I would say in my personal life and in this book, in the life of this journey towards becoming an author, I've had to deal with a lot of rejection. And I pretty much, I thought I had like 200 rejections, but it turns out I only had 50 because I counted them. I kept all the correspondence.
It felt like 200.
It did. I had
It
two
does.
big folders of rejections. And one day I counted them just to be sure, and there were like 50. So it wasn't 200, no, but still 50. And so they felt pretty, they felt like they were coming one after another after another. And I just got to the point where I expected them, and was like, next, what's next, what's next? And then when I finally got a yes from a publisher, the first publisher, and like I said, we had a disagreement and I lost her. She backed out of the contract after 2 years of working with her. When I read her acceptance of me, I pretty much was like, okay, fine. And then I was like, wait, what? Wait, you want to publish my book? So I hope I didn't do that with any others that might have come across, but I was so used to reading the rejection that I expected the rejection. So how do you move on from that? How do you move on from losing your job? I lost my job about a year ago, downsized. Journalists, there's a lot of downsizing in journalism. It's struggling. And so I lost my job. That was the first time for me that I had lost my job in that way, although probably others have been through it a few times. I went back to work when my children were, when my daughter, my youngest, went to college, so that I could get, and I was able to do that. I was able to get back in full time. And then I went from one job to another job. And then that was the job that I lost. So I was back working for about 5 years before that happened, for 3 years for the first publication. And then 2 years for the second publication, which was much bigger than the first one. So I did pretty well, if you think about it, from somebody who was freelancing the whole time. But not that my freelancing wasn't impressive, but it was freelancing, which wasn't looked at the same way it is now, because I'm a freelancer now and nobody has any problem with it. But back then it wasn't.
Right, the stigma that was associated with it.
There was until COVID, I guess. And so I have maintained my career even though, I'm on the front page of my local paper sometimes. So I've maintained my career despite, getting socked in the stomach with losing my job. I've been able to get back into my career after being home with my children until they were in their 20s. And I've been able to finally get this book published, despite all those rejections and all the years of working on it. So I guess those are the silver linings. The book is One Man's Quest to Find the Silver Lining in Misfortune. So I guess one woman's quest to find the silver lining in misfortune. Sure. Really, if you look at it from both of our angles, these are not big issues. Okay, he had TB. I do not have any health problems. My issues are small potatoes. And he had health problems, and he still probably thought other people have it worse, so I have it good. So it's just the way he is. My mom, I will tell you, she is the one who passed me the cassette tapes and I don't think she expected that I would write a book from it. I did write a column for the publication I was writing for at the time. But she, God bless her, she had COVID and poison ivy at the same time. Ooh. And then she got bit in the face by a bug, and they were in Asheville for the flooding. Although they were up on a mountain, they're up higher elevation, so they did lose power and everything. But she just giggles through everything. I didn't know that she had poison ivy at the same time she had COVID, because she keeps it to herself a little bit. But I had poison ivy and then I got COVID and I was a mess. I was, woe's me, I mean, it's rough. And, but I don't giggle when that happens. She giggles. She just, oh, it's okay. It's all right. What are you going to do? So, that attitude is, is powerful. I wish I had it more. I must have inherited more of my dad's attitudes. But I think if you can laugh things off a little bit, it would be helpful in life. And
Sure.
I don't think that my grandfather dwelled on what was bad happening to him. He didn't complain. I remember my grandmother complaining, but he didn't complain. But when I knew them, the tables were turned and she was struggling with circulation problems in her legs. And that made her lumbar, which is in the book. And she had trouble walking. And he was the one who seemed to be healthy. But I hadn't heard that he was the one who was not healthy for a long time.
Right.
So payback. But so there was a lot of learning that came from researching this book.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And Jody Lynn, I mean, you're a farm girl living in the heartland of Canada, which is chock full of people who immigrated and became farmers. I imagine that part of the story really kind of resonates because of where you live.
100%. My grandparents, some of them, and my great grandparents, all of them, on both sides of my family, are all immigrants. So I understand the concept of like the golden place. I've heard about stories of like my great grandparents coming here and they're like, don't bring your tools. Canada's got it all. They've got it all set up. You're going to be like, it's going to be so wonderful. And then hearing about the devastation when they got here and they had no tools to make anything, like they were blacksmiths and carpenters and like things like that, horse people, and they're like, well, what do we do now? And if it wasn't my grandpa used to say this, that his parents would say, if it wasn't for the Native Americans that lived in the area, they would have starved to death. Like they're the ones that taught them how to trap rabbits and build things, or not build things, but give them the tools to build things and have a stove. Like my dad grew up in everything. It seems on the east side of Canada was developing faster than the west side of Canada, probably just the way that things were. People immigrated. But like they had, TVs already, I think, in fridges in the east side of Canada. And my dad was still going with his family to the local river and cutting out a block of ice. And that was their ice chest. So yeah, it definitely, it stirs up a lot of feelings. And I wish that I would have gotten to, have more conversations with them. I don't remember my great grandparents and, my grandparents, couple of them I remember at least. But yeah, it's so interesting. And even the, Ukraine getting split up, or put together. I don't really know the history, but in the way that you were talking about what was going on in Gaza and how you were feeling about that on that side of things, I know that I've watched my mom after the last little while, her parents and her grandparents, so my grandparents and great grandparents are from Ukraine. And so everything that's going on with Russia really has hit a nerve. And it's been interesting to watch all of that play out and how there's so much loyalty, history, feelings towards a place. I've never been there. Obviously my mom has, but like just thinking about all of that history, there's a lot there, and they went through a whole lot more than we did and giggled. Like that's how my great grandparents and grandparents was like, this is no big deal. You can't go to the gym. Oh, okay. We didn't have to go to the gym because we were working to survive.
Yeah.
It's a different perspective. That's for sure.
Definitely.
I especially like the part of your story where you talked about how your mom gave you the cassette tapes that your grandfather made.
Yes.
My paternal grandfather passed some 10, 11 years before I was born, so didn't know him at all. My dad, in the last few years of his life, wrote a collection of little short stories about my grandfather so that I could get to know my grandfather, who I had never known. I consider that one of the best gifts I was ever given, because it fills in a gap with a family member that I knew nothing about. I knew my other grandparents. I knew all three of the others, but I never knew him. And wow, having that information, I mean, there were stories that he had told verbally throughout the years, but having them collected all in one place and reading through them, I think my uncle, my dad's brother, expressed it best. He says, "You captured the man in what you wrote in the stories." And that's what you're looking for as the descendant. You want to know who was the man, who was the woman, who were these people who were my ancestors. I mean, you want them to be more than just names and dates on a family tree.
And a lot of times the names and dates aren't even maybe the date, but the names aren't correct. It's how it sounds. Like my maiden name is Shep, but it's spelled Schoepp. Like what happened?
Changed.
Yeah, like what? So it's that way for us, but there's people who we're finding out that we're related to that it's spelled Shepp because it's just phonetically spelled. They're like, yes, this is how you spell it, because none of them knew how to spell when this was going on. So you can't even really trace your lineage properly because, well, no one really knew how do you spell that. It sounds pretty simple, but I don't know why they put an O and an E in there. Like it makes no sense to me. No one ever says it correctly. So
and even if they came through Ellis Island, to New York, like my family, well, no, my family didn't come that way. But even if they came that way, they wrote things down wrong, and then that's your family name. So they twisted it a little bit. So, but my grandfather actually came. My grandparents met in Montreal. So, and so that's in the book also. And I believe he was a cobbler when he was there in Canada. But they met, and then she was in New York, and he was coming to New York too. So it worked out. Yeah. But cool. He met her. And then the next time that they got together was when he was in the hospital. So that's when he got TB right after that, or, he was sick with TB after that. So, which is very contagious. So, but she came to visit him in the hospital. And he actually almost didn't live and was in a coma, but she was there during that time. So I guess very well protected from this contagious disease, but she was there.
I can't imagine, Roni, the amount of research and the complexity of the research or finding out all of this stuff really would have been, because you think about it, you started writing this a long time ago and researching this stuff back before really the internet was as good as it is today. And then on top of that, you think about how much countries have changed, like even your grandparents being in Montreal. Well, that was like Upper Canada or Lower Canada, or I don't know, like something completely different. Can you speak to that experience of like trying to piece things together? You'd have to be a wicked investigator to follow that many changes.
I'm a wicked investigator. There you go. Done.
Well, that comes from being a journalist. You have to be in order to be a journalist.
So as a journalist now, you're right. It was before the internet. So I had to physically march my little self to the archives, national archives in many cities. And there was a national archives here. It wasn't very close to my home, so about an hour away. I sat in the National Archives and I looked through microfilm and microfiche and on these old-fashioned machines. And so we didn't have the internet back. It wasn't. There wasn't all this information on the internet. Yeah. So Ancestry.com is available now. I don't know if you can trust it totally, but it's available now. I mean, you have to do your own research because you're not sure about the names, like Jody Lynn talked about. So I started doing that so I'm writing a second book loosely based on my dad's life. And so I can use the internet now, but the first time around, I had to go to the archives. I also went to the Church of Latter-day Saints. The Mormons have a family history center.
They have an excellent
I looked up family history there. And again, it's fiction. So I actually don't have to be totally right, just believable. So I think I found all the proper information because I think it was the census information was legitimate. And you can do a lot of cross-referencing to ensure that your information is correct. But yes, before the internet. So it was tough, but I was determined to get my facts straight. And all the way along, I had to be historically accurate, pop culture, what was going on at the time. They went through the Depression. What was that like? Right. What could it have been like? Just different cultural aspects of being Jewish or, and speaking Yiddish and school relations, teachers, I brought all that to bear. I brought that all into the discussion, into the dialogue. One of the children goes to school and the teacher says, don't use that word here. You use spoon. We say spoon here. We don't say gupo. So he went back home and he said, the teacher says I need to not use the word gupo. And my grandfather or grandmother said, you use the word spoon. If the teacher tells you to use the word spoon, it's spoon. No more, don't be bringing Yiddish. But he's like, oh, I'm so confused. You use the word gupo. Why can't I use it? So anyway, there are different parts of the story like that spell out what the culture would have been like at the time. What's it like to not have for things to cost a nickel. For day-old bread to cost a nickel. Different policies then, culture, what were they wearing? How would they refer to each other? Like, were you a dame or were you a doll? Or, what kind of words would you have used endearing to speak to each other? So many little details that I wanted to get right. So clothing, pop culture, there was a lot of that to make sure.
A lot of stuff to go. Yeah, like I never would have thought of half of those things. Like it's wild.
Maybe I overthought it as to why.
No, I think the depth of the story makes me want to read it. Of all of these things, I love that when those things are included.
Yeah. Well, that with any fictional story, whether it be in writing or on the screen or in a theater or whatever, we're looking to what they call suspend our disbelief. And in order to suspend the disbelief, you have to believe it. On some level, there has to be belief. That's where the detail comes in. The detail helps create that level of belief. So I agree with you, Jody Lynn. The work you did, Roni, to unearth the real details, I'm sure it paid off handsomely because that's what made the novel feel real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think anybody who has heard either their parents, grandparents, or whatever tell stories about back then is going to relate, just like I have. Like even you're talking about names like Dame or whatever. I think about my Baba, so my grandmother's marriage license. It said that she was a spinster.
Oh boy, yeah.
But so reading your book when you're talking about these things, I would relate to that because I've seen different words like that in my own lineage or own history, and like, oh, it's a real thing. Look at that.
And I found that people who read the book will come to me and say, oh, I had an uncle that was just like that. Yeah. Your characters sound just like my family. So that's great. And or I had a uncle or somebody who was a trolley driver, in my family. So or a cobbler or a tailor.
Right.
Tailor is probably more common. Farmer is probably more common, but they pick out different characters and relate to that character. Or what I have found, especially among my Jewish readers, is, which is probably the majority, is that they relate very well to the story, that my story and my family is their family. I would also say Christians learn a lot from the book about the Jewish culture that they didn't know. So it's pretty universal. Anyone who is a immigrant, ethnic families, there's a lot of similarities with any ethnic or immigrant families with this.
One of the people listening live as we're recording this, and there usually aren't too many, but one of them listening live is named Sharon. She's been posting up a storm, commenting, talking here. And,
really?
And at one point, a few minutes ago, when you were talking about the difference between times now and times then, she said times have changed so much. So she captured that thought. When you were talking about how the times have changed and you made reference to things costing a nickel and so forth, it made me think back to my childhood when things were a lot cheaper in terms of nominal pricing than they are now. But at that point in time, family members, parents, grandparents, and so forth would talk about how things were so much cheaper when they were growing up.
Right.
And the contrast in my mind is really staggering, because at that point in time, we were paying like, 25, 30 cents for a candy bar. Well, now a candy bar is what, $5 or something?
Right.
It's not even comparable. But they would compare it to a candy bar costing a penny. And like,
definitely.
I
mean, if it was 5 cents, then what was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't even have pennies anymore. I think the US took them out of circulation too, right?
Do we not have pennies?
Oh, maybe it's just a Canadian thing. Yeah, Canada took the penny out of circulation. They're like, no more. So they either round up or round down, depending on where the number is.
We still have pennies, but nobody uses them. That's all.
Oh, yeah. No, now you can't. You can't use the penny. They took it right out of circulation. No more.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, part of the problem is that the copper in the penny was worth more than the penny, and then they put zinc in, and then the zinc became worth more.
Oh boy!
So after a while, you just say, "Okay, I give up."
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, debasing the currency—that's another topic for another day.
We could talk all about that.
But getting back to our conversation here, I love how you obviously went to a great deal of trouble. And there was obviously passion and love behind it that made you want to create your story with such a high level of realistic detail. So that's why I keep coming back to it. I think that, first of all, it's laudable because there's so much work that goes into it. But second of all, that's what makes it credible. I mean, that goes back to what I was talking about before, the suspension of disbelief. I mean, when something is credible, we buy into it more easily. And so, yeah, more kudos to you for doing that. That was it may have been a lot of work, but I think it was worth it.
Thank you. I hope so. Yeah.
So I presume that the book is available everywhere.
Yes.
That's especially when you go through a publisher. They make it a point to do that. They're very good about those kinds of things.
Right.
But how about you? Are you available? I mean, if other writers want to reach out to you, or people want to find out more about you, how do they find out more about you? How do they contact you? How do they reach you?
So I'm all over social media, and my website is ronirobbins.com, but you got to spell my name right, RoniRobbins. Okay. And you can learn more than you ever want to know on there. And I've got like 4 Facebook's accounts, 2 of which are related to the book. But the one I use most often is Roni Kane Robbins, Kayne Robbins. I've got an Instagram. I don't know what's going on with TikTok, but I have a TikTok. I think that one is Hands of Gold Novel. The Instagram is Roni.Robbins. Most of it is Roni Robbins. I'm on X. I'm on LinkedIn. Probably those are the main ones. Yeah, I'm everywhere. I've got two X's, but I don't know if anyone, or Twitter, but I don't know who's even on that anymore, because I established some accounts based on my maiden name to get those that knew me as before I got married, and also some are connected with the book. And I did like an extra X when I was trying to keep my professional life separate from my work life, for working for publications. So people should be able to find me. And my email is also roni.robbins@yahoo.com. So people can reach me. The book is everywhere books are sold, on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Books A Million and Walmart and Target and Goodreads. So it's out there. And if you Google me, you'll find a lot about me as a journalist, me as an author. And much of it is also highlighted on my website.
Fantastic.
And they can buy the book there too.
Is there ever going to be an Audible version of the book?
If the book takes off in the present versions, then yes. My nephew made a sort of a monotone one, so I'll have to get him to make one that's more personable. But it cost a bit to get a Audible.
Yeah.
I think at least 1,000, probably more. So I haven't done that yet. I'm also writing my next novel, like I said, loosely based on my dad's life. He was a blacksmith, a metal worker. And he also trained the astronauts for the Apollo space launch. We talked about that earlier, NASA. And would you believe, then years later, I became a reporter on the Space Coast newspaper in Florida. I covered the space launches. So weird how life is so cyclical and ironic. It's part of my name, irony. My husband's name is
I
Ian.
love it.
My husband's name is Ian, so his name and my name together is irony.
Okay.
But life is just so amazing. The twists and turns of life, and how things are just meant to be, and also just your family's life intertwines with your own and helps craft who you are. Brings meaning and also shapes who you are. It seems, where we came from.
I think it's fabulous that you're drawing on your family tree in order to write your novels. That's really, really good.
Because there's not enough about myself to make it interesting, maybe. And also, I like strong male characters, I think. So, I mean, it's only my second book, so who knows? But strong male characters that are interesting personalities, I think. Mm-hmm. And I happen to have them, so...
Jodi Lynn knows a few things about strong male characters in the family line as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You betcha. I need to write my own book.
You probably will at one point, I would imagine.
Maybe one day. Yeah.
So what's your big takeaway, Jodi Lynn, when you're thinking back to the conversation we had with Roni today?
Oh, I'm going to echo some of the words that you used, because I think that they're so beautiful. I think that, everything comes back around and everything happens for a reason, and how beautiful it is to have these individuals in your family that you can look up to and learn more about, even when they're gone. And I think our entire conversation just reminds me how grateful I am for the people that I've had in my life, how grateful I am for the people I have currently in my life, and a kick in the ass to go find out more, because when they're gone, and it's so much harder than just asking them the question and having that moment now, today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful stuff. I love that. I want to echo that. Now I'm going to add in one other thing too, something that I've been doing regularly now for a few years, because I think what you did with your novel and what you're going to do with the upcoming novel they're a kind of activity that I would imagine is going to happen more and more. And I think you're probably an inspiration for that. I think more and more people are going to realize that it's important to tell their family stories. And that to me is how the culture ties together in the long run. Because those narratives, I mean, that's been the narrative the series of narratives that built culture to begin with, dating back hundreds, thousands of years. Family narratives passed along from generation to generation. And in those were also included cultural narratives and country narratives and so forth. But primarily local narratives and family narratives were what drove it. So I love that you're doing that part. And I know that you do other podcasts. You mentioned all the social media channels. My goodness, I think you have all of them. Did you miss any? I don't think you really did. But you have all these different ways you're putting out all these great pieces of information about what you've been doing with your family stories and inspiring other people. You were inspiring Sharon in the commentary she was making. She was very inspired by the things you were talking about.
That's great.
Yeah. So that I think that's really important to recognize. I think it's also important to recognize there are a lot of people who are inspired by you that don't even know about. Because you've been reaching out in all these different ways, and you don't hear about all the different stories. You don't hear about all the different ways that you're inspiring people, but you are.
Oh, I hope so.
Recognize that. So I like to say on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen.
Oh, I
love
that.
Thank you for what you're doing. Yeah, it's important. You're making a difference in people's lives.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, I think
Isn't that what we're here for?
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you once again. Best of luck. Continued good luck with the book. I mean, you've been doing well so far, but I hope you keep getting great sales and good luck with the upcoming novel. Any idea when that's coming out?
No.
Knowing your history, it could be any time between now and 15 years from now.
So my dad passed away. Yeah, I hope it doesn't take me 20 years. My dad passed away in March, so it's been almost a year. And in that period, I've been mourning. Every day I go to my synagogue for a mourner's prayer, or online if there's not enough people for it, or when I'm on vacation online, or in person when I'm away from home. I'm still doing that for a whole year because supposedly the Jewish tradition is it elevates his soul. So I wrote the beginning and the ending because I did that with my first book. I feel like that those are the most impactful sections of the book. And I've got I don't have interviews. I have articles that were written about my dad. He was written up because of his blacksmithing. And there's also documents from his life. So yeah, I don't know when it's going to come out, but the working title is A Mighty Arm, taking off on the hands of gold. And then he was a blacksmith, so he used a hammer and a mighty arm. I guess look for it. I'm trying not to be a one book author, but it's going to take a while.
Sometimes you just have
freelancing.
The good things just take a while to come out. That's all there is to it.
Right. And I'm freelancing for 2 publications. So, I'm doing 2, I used to be able to do 3. Now I just do, I'm writing for 2 different publications. So, so when I can, I will work on the book too. It's gonna take. I don't have 20 years, so I gotta speed it up.
You gotta speed it up.
Yeah.
So there's a little burr under your saddle. Okay, that's a good thing. Well, Roni, thank you so much for sharing your story. And
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You all too.
Yeah.
For sure.
And thank Jody Lynn. I mean, this resonated, didn't it?
Yeah, this was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really, really good stuff. So thank you much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.